Okay, everybody, we are live on YouTube. Scott, how's that feel?
That feels good, man. I didn't hear the sound on that track, but
I
I
didn't
just,
either.
so hopefully others did.
Well, they didn't need to. They could read. They
There you
could
go.
read it and get to it. But everybody, welcome to our first and hopefully many episodes of Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery. I'm one of your hosts, Fred Carroll, and we are joined by my friend Scott H. Silverman. How are you, kind sir?
I'm good, man. And it's interesting. I'm on the West Coast. I think people need to know that, which means dinner's coming up for me. And you're on the East Side, which means you're planning for breakfast very soon. So glad to be here. Looking forward to answering some questions and hearing some thoughts from people and hear how people are doing with all the unique things that are going on in our world today.
Yeah, and usually we have Jennifer Field, my co-host from my other podcast, joining us. She unfortunately had an issue with work and she might join us later, but tonight we're going to do more of an introduction. Our phone lines are open to anybody that wants to call in, but we're aware that until you know who we are, you probably aren't going to call in. So,
Oh, let them call. Let's
you
get
know,
to know them right now. If they
call.
call, we'll make sure they know who we are one way or another. How's that?
Yeah, definitely. So tonight is more meant as an introductory about us, who we are, what our show is intended to do. But the phone line is open, like I said. If you have an issue or a family member, a loved one, friend, neighbor, etc., anyone that needs assistance in many different fields, we'll accept any field right now. We'll probably scale it down as we need to, or as our avenues don't work. Who knows? We'll see what we run into. But feel free to call us. It's 475-209-2929, extension 800 when prompted. And remember, if you want to remain anonymous and you want to come on live with us, you could put *67 before you dial the number, because unfortunately we can't control your anonymity on the show. We'd love to, but we can't. So you have to control it.
Yep. And there
So
aren't there
tell
aren't really there aren't really many shows that actually give you the opportunity to come in anonymously. And I think when you and I talked about the strategy about the show, the idea was to be able to tell people, look, if you don't want to talk about who you are, that's okay, but you need to talk about what's going on. That's what
yeah.
we're here for.
Well,
That's what we're here for.
why don't you tell the people about your story?
Okay.
And
Anyway, so again, I'm Scott H. Silverman, and I like to use the H because there's a colleague of mine in Japan. He gets a lot of my stuff, and that way you can Google me if you have any questions or thoughts. Grew up here in San Diego. Currently, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit to hopefully make the story a little bit more seamless. I'm a crisis coach here in San Diego. I'm also a family navigator, and I run an outpatient substance use disorder treatment program working with adults, professionals, and veterans. And my goal each day is to take a call that comes in from somebody I don't know and try to help them navigate the next best steps. Matter of fact, just before the show started tonight, I got a call from somebody who said, I had your name down here and my contacts and the word help next to it. And I said, well, what kind of help would you like? And we talked for a couple of minutes because I had to rush to do this. And turns out her sister gave her my name and number, and she put help down next to it. I guess she was under the influence when she got the information. So we're going to talk on Monday and see how I can be a resource for her. So that's what I do on a national basis with my colleague, Fred here, to try to let people know that, there is hope and help. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country or the world, there's resources out there and there are people that can help you, and you shouldn't be afraid and raise your hand and say, I need help. So that's what we're all about. How can we help?
yeah, it definitely. And myself, I realize that there's a lot of people right now who know me from my other podcasts. And I'm sure right at this moment they're saying, who is this mature, extremely attractive man with the lazy left
Well, they
eye?
can't all be saying that. Maybe a certain percentage, Fred, but
Yeah.
not all of them.
Well, most of them. I mean, it works. And who is this man speaking so gentle and compassionately? So I just want people to understand that, you know, I have many, 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 many sides to me, all to my moralities and stuff. My comedy often utilizes like harsh and cynical tones, but overall, Jennifer, who's my co-host on Within the Head of Fred, whether we're talking about sex or politics, our underlying intention is often teaching lessons through our comedy. So it's always through a comical view, but that's my shameless plug. Within the Head of Fred is my podcast. If you want to go listen to it, it's a shameless plug, but it's a plug nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just shameless when you bring it up, but when you bring it up 3 or 4 times, Fred, it's more than shameless. It's really good marketing. So
Right.
I
I'm
I
a great
applaud that.
marketer.
Yeah.
Great
But
marketer.
I want to point something out because I think you bring up something that's really valid and valuable. And and I'm a guy in long-term recovery, and when people first get to recovery and they start leaving the self-medication on the table and push away from it, that they get branded, as as a drug addict or an alcoholic, and these are just labels that. And part of the reduce the stigma of the concept of this show is that I believe that this is a disease. And it's just like, diabetes. If you have this disease of diabetes or you have a disease of any other type, getting assessed, getting a professional, getting treatment leads to recovery, and long-term recovery leads to improving the quality of life. So when you mentioned that, you've got your comedic side and then there's a serious side, as people, we all have different levels. We wake up in the morning, some of us excited and jump out of bed, others carry some heavy stuff. And the idea of talking about it is how we get better. And way we reduce stigma is to bring it to the forefront. So when you said that, a senseless, silly, shameful plug, I think it's great. And I think it's great that you're able to, bring that side of who you are to what we're doing here. Because this topic is a serious one. But at the end of the day, when it comes to humor, it's one of the best platforms, in my opinion, to help create an openness, an opportunity. And if we can help convey, some thoughts about hope and help with comedy and with humor, I think we'll be able to let people know that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, it definitely is, because even outside of all my comedy and comedy routines I do on the podcast, my personal life has taken many paths. It's gone in all different directions, from being sexually and physically abused as a child. I've successfully raised my own children as a single parent, written and published 9 books. I think 9 books now. I tell people I'm deep, I'm fun, I'm funny, I'm cynical, compassionate, scientific, stable in my own mind, and I'm also complicated. So I have a broad range of things that have. I'm shallow, empty, erratic, honest to a fault, but I survive every day. Every single day I'm surviving. And I don't let any of those past issues I had as a child affect me. So I've never have personally been an addict. I've never had an addiction beyond smoking cigarettes or vaping, which I understand are addictions. And we could help with that too. I mean, if somebody wants to call in and they're really struggling quitting smoking, I could tell you the benefits of quitting smoking. I know it's not as deep as opioid use or anything, but listen, it all kills you. It'll all take your life eventually if you don't get help for it. So I'm just
And
human.
anything that somebody does compulsively and obsessively, there's a risk factor to it, other than I think exercise. And I think, I shared with you, it's one of the things that unfortunately I need to work on it quite a bit as well. And I think about it today. I'm 66 and I'm trying to figure out how do I really nutritionally and mindfully really make some changes that will, nothing wrong with me right now. I feel healthy physiologically, and I'd like to lose some weight. And I don't know how many people we get people to raise their hands, gain some weight during this, COVID crisis. But at the end of the day, the idea of moving forward and working on changing oneself and being mindful and finding ways to make improvements, little things make big differences. So it doesn't have to be a dramatic change. So when you talk about all your history and things you've done, those are the things that have made you who you are, and they've given you lessons in life that when you can share with others, people will know that those deep, dark secrets that, the stigma contributes to feed, we have to change that. We have to reduce and remove the stigma so we can talk about these things, whether it's depression or anxiety. I mean, look at the recent incident, in DC after, the inauguration where, 2 law enforcement professionals actually took their own life. That just displays how easy, no matter who you are, how well trained you are, how well spoken you are, how smart you are, behavioral health, depression, anxiety, and all the different mood disorders that are out there. We're not going to get into all the labels because we want to talk about removing some of those labels so we can actually get down to the root of what it really requires us to do to make those kind of changes in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. And the stigma is part of the reason I had mentioned to a friend a few minutes ago before going on how nervous I was to do a live event. There's a lot of people listening that are strangers, for instance, but I have a lot
Right.
of friends out there listening that had no idea that I was, physically and sexually abused. So, if they listen to my show like they should on being a friend, I have joked about it on my podcast, and I shouldn't say joked about it, but put it into a comedic turn, somehow. I can't even explain it, but I did it Fred way. I explained it in Fred words. So me saying it live, and I told you this before the show, I think if I'm willing to say it, that's the only way we're going to get other people to start talking about it. And it's the only way we're going to solve it and make sure no other children get injured or hurt. And believe me, you can suffer with it. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky that I didn't have an addiction to solve that problem. And I think you're aware of this, that, one thing that happened when I was 7 could ruin my life. And we're going to try to stop that. And hopefully people call in and will talk to us about it.
Yeah. So tell me, let me embarrass you a little bit if I may, and I don't mean to, but when you shared it, in this format like you did tonight, how did that feel in your stomach and your gut? What was that like?
Well, I get very nervous when I'm saying, what really bothers me the most, and it makes no sense because I never spoke to this to my parents,
Hmm.
and they could be watching. Technically, they probably aren't, but they could be watching. That's who I was thinking of when I said this. And because I've always kept it from them because of their age now. And we're going back 40 years now. It's over. It's done. I've already taken care of my own mentality. I'm fine. I don't suffer from it or anything. In fact, I'm using it now as a weapon to help other children. And I hope, at least. And adults too, not just children. Anybody could be sexually abused. It could be a wife. It could be anybody. So that's what I'm hoping we could at least get at something out of this, where people are calling in, telling us their problems. I guess we will do our best, especially you from a drug and alcohol standpoint. How long have you been clean, by the way? How long have you been sober?
Just celebrated November 2020, 36 continuous years, and it sounds like a big number, and technically it is, but the way I look at it is, each day is a new day. I go to my home group on a regular basis. I practice, what I need to in my recovery, and I try to manage things better than I used to. And that's, to me, what living life on life's terms all about in recovery is, making mistakes, making corrections, and knowing that, as a human being, we make mistakes. But what I've learned in recovery is I can fix a lot of them. I can adjust. I can mature through them, and I don't have to live alone with them. Like you were saying that, as a child, what happened to you, I don't even know how long you lived with that before you talk to somebody else about it. Because there's a term I like in recovery. It says we're only as sick as our secrets, which means when you have something that catastrophic happen to you at a young age and it doesn't get processed normally, and how do you process something like that? So that gets buried inside, and then things like PTSD, stress, anxiety, other depression, co-occurring issues, and then people start to self-medicate. In many ways, those kind of young youthful traumas are part of the trajectory of what happens to people when as they get older, and those feelings aren't processed, they'll start to act out in different ways. And again, that's part of what creates the stigma, because when you raise your hand and say, hey, I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic, or I've been a victim of, fill in the blanks, people may judge you. And there will be people that judge you. But if you keep it inside, I assure you, the phrase I like is pressure busts pipes. So we need to talk about these kind of things. We need to not be alone with them. And this may not be the platform to tell your whole life story, but if what you hear here and see here encourages you to know that you're not alone, then we're able to create an environment that really will open people's hearts, hopefully, to not only start getting help for it, but also asking for help as well.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you that I didn't speak about it until about a year ago.
Yeah.
It was a year ago. And the only reason I spoke about it was because I found a way to move it into my podcast, which is recorded. So it's easy to speak. It felt good to talk about it, but nobody was listening. That's what made doing this in a live forum a little different. But
So
it's not, it's,
what triggered you, Fred, to a year ago? Because I know I don't know your exact age, but I know you're much younger than I am. So tell me what triggered you to all of a sudden want to share this, especially in a public way?
I could tell you exactly. I was triggered when the person who sexually abused me friend requested me on Facebook.
Wow.
So I was able to, it became a story.
Hmm.
I was already friend. I should say it was a woman, a girl. It was a teenage girl at the time. She's now in her 60s or whatever. But she friend requested me and I sent her a private message. She sent me a private message first asking me how I was. And I took the opportunity to right there and then tell her that I am doing amazingly fine considering what she did to me as a child. And the only reason I talked about it was because her response was, I don't want to use the word brave, but it was so honest and forthright. She didn't deny it. She apologized for it. And that gave me permission to talk about it because I do forgive her. I don't forget. Listen, it's not the end of the world. It didn't destroy my life, luckily, but we're aware that so many of these kids and adults on opioids and heroin and all the drugs that are out there are on them trying to get away from the demon of being abused
And I
and
would be
stuff.
willing
So
to, I'd be willing to bet if we could find a way to have a conversation with her, or I could, that if she was willing to be candid, honest, and forthright and had a conscience, and my sense would be if she reached out, she probably does. There are probably things in her life growing up that she was not able to manage as well as she wanted to, that or possibly caused her to have a backlash from that kind of behavior. And no matter what her motivation was, whether it's conscious or subconscious, the fact that that act took place and clearly she remembered it, she was impacted by it, which means it could have changed a lot of things for her as well. And in some ways, being the batterer versus the battery, if you will, not the victim. Again, if they have a conscience, that sometimes the torture they go through is significant as well.
yeah. And listen, I'm not tortured by it. My children actually were aware of this before I spoke about it on the air. So I did speak with my children about it.
Good.
They were already aware of my physical abuse as a child, but they weren't aware of that sexual abuse. But listen, nobody's judging me on it. Actually, quite honestly, I get more positive feedback for mentioning it than negative. I've had a few. There's always a few out there. I've had, quite honestly, when we mentioned starting this show and doing this show, I received I had some friends say that this wasn't a good idea, that this wasn't going to work, that I couldn't do this. And that's all I need to hear is tell me I can't do it and I'm going to try.
That was your motivator?
Well, it's one of them. You were my other one. I mean, becoming friends with you, and I should tell people you were a guest on my podcast, and that's how we met. And we had a great show. We talked about all the stuff you're connected with, and so Scott's mostly involved in the alcohol, the opioids, drug abuse, stuff like that. Me and Jennifer and I should speak proper if I'm going to be on live YouTube.
Uh-oh,
But
don't go changing, Fred.
that's right. Jennifer and I are very strong. Not that you're not, but suicide prevention is a huge issue for both of us, and I'm sure as well with you. And Jennifer also is very big into helping people with eating disorders. So these are
Yeah.
all things you could call in about.
And you know, it's interesting. I've never met anybody who had an experience with self-medication, whether it be drinking or acting out appropriately or gambling or had a eating disorder or prescription drug abuse, whatever it might be. It's not just, it doesn't stop there. You know, once you remove, once you remove the anesthesia, once you stop taking the things that keep you away from your feelings and keep you out of your head, what happens is the real work starts. The issues around maybe that were contributing to why you were, you know, self-medicating to such a high level, and substance use disorder really became a part of your life. I mean, for me, drinking, it was clearly a part of my life, but it was almost as many hours I was working, and I was working a 70, 80-hour work week growing up in a family business where, you know, I thought I was loved, and I believe I was, and I had siblings who didn't have the issues. But once you stop drinking and using and self-medicating, or you deal with the trauma, and work through that, that's when you start to really get mindful and you get that gut health, and you really start to improve not only how you feel, but how you treat others in your life and how others can treat you now, because your wall is down. And once you remove the stigma and you can move that, you know, the engine of change forward, you really can create a mindful, peaceful, joyous, and free lifestyle that everyone seeks. But when you've been impacted by something, you know, and by the way, catastrophic events could be anything from, you know, obviously something horrific that, you know, you experienced, Fred, the loss of a family member, you know, someone who dies young. I lost my brother 30 years ago. I mean, that was catastrophic. And you know, I can remember I had a major shift because I have an eating disorder that it goes way back, and I can't wait to, you know, talk with Jen about it. And when he passed away, you know, I put a lot of weight on because food was a fix for me. And, you know, it was very sad, and he was very young, and it was a long time ago, but I still think about it. And, but what I'm joyous about is I feel feelings today because I'm not numbing myself. And even though
Right.
I don't like to sometimes, but part of the joy I have in my work is by working with others. I feel less alone in my own stuff that I've experienced and things that I don't deal with. I mean, I used to have, you know, major episodes with temper tantrums. It used to last maybe hours or days. I still have them, but now I usually try to fix them within 30 minutes because, you know, people around me go, whoa, or I realize that was inappropriate, and I'm able to make my amends and hopefully be heard by that and then move forward. So experientially and anecdotally, that's really what I bring to the table. You know, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a doctor, and but I've been in the field of treatment for years and volunteering for decades and helping others by reaching out my hand. And when people ask for help, I try never to say no. I mean, I wrote a whole book, Tell Me No, I Dare You. I, like you, Fred, when someone says, you can't do something, I go, okay, that's when I put it into first gear and start moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of it is a great motivator. There's
Yep.
no better motivation. Now there's a better motivator, and a lot of people don't realize this, but the better motivator is somebody that supports you rather than detracts against you. When
Right.
you have somebody standing from an author standpoint, most successful authors have a amazing woman or man, depending who it is,
We
behind
call it
them.
significant other here in California.
Significant other behind them supporting what they do
Right.
rather than detracting. So I will go on. The person that did get on me about this is it's a friend, but kind of a loose friendship. So I'm not taking what she said with too much further. You know, it doesn't affect me. So other than that, you actually you began your road to sobriety due to a suicide attempt, correct? Or
Correct. That was, you know, they talk about hitting bottom. I don't think everyone has to, but my bottom was actually just a week of horrible blackout drinking. And I didn't know how to, I was going to explain it to everybody in my sphere of influence and my family, of course. So I was prepared to take my own life, and, you know, through divine intervention, I was not successful, which is great. And then that night I flew home I was on a business trip in New York, and the next day I checked into treatment. And from that day forward, that was in November of 1984, I've done everything that I believe it's been suggested to me to try to maintain my own recovery and to try to, there's this saying I like, give it away so you can keep it. So I do a lot of volunteer work. I do this professionally. I'm a crisis coach, so I work with families as a consultant. And sometimes it's funny when I quote my fee, people go, well, that's a lot of money. And I said, well, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and they don't want to pay the money because they're just frugal. And I said, look, if not spending the money motivates you to get into change, I don't care, as long as I found a way and we've found a way to help you. And it's amazing. Probably out of every 5 potential clients I talk to, there's usually 2 that just go, I'd rather put that money to something else. I said, good. And they get frustrated with the idea of having to spend money to get help. But we do it with lawyers, we do it with doctors, we do it with accountants, we do it to get our hair done, we do it with the auto mechanics, people that, the plumbing goes bad, you bring an expert in to fix the plumbing. So that's what I am. I'm an expert, I believe, in this field. And as a subject matter expert, I try to do what I can. And my biggest skill is trying to help somebody understand what's going on and then help me understand where they're at. And then we together make some suggestions to them on what direction they should take next. That's the navigating part of it, because it's really not as hard as people think. And even though I'm in San Diego, I can help anybody anywhere in the world because there's resources everywhere. But when it comes to looking for them, people don't know what to do. And there aren't a lot of information sources out. That's why when you and I talked about this, I thought, what a great idea to really set up a platform where people can make phone calls. And then we get them to come back in a week and check in and see how they're doing, because that's going to be an inspiration to somebody else. So down the road, we start having callers call back and go, oh, my son this, and we call here and we used your name, and they didn't know who you were, but they Googled you and they said, we got to get him over here to help us. And we do, and they get their individual loved one access to help. I mean, that to me that's God's work.
Yeah. And it's all interesting to me that there, like you have told me many times, there's so much help available out there. It's just nobody knows how to get where they, to starting. So that's what our goal is. When somebody calls in, just let's play a little game, kind of like somebody did just call in. If somebody called in and they had a brother that they're afraid is going down a bad path with opioid use or pills, what advice would we first give this person after hearing them talk?
Well, the first thing I always like to suggest is check in with whoever you're closest with and you trust the most. If you have a primary care doctor, if you have a faith-based leader, or if you have somebody in your family that's actually been through it, because most families do. People aren't isolated.
Hey, Scott, 1 minute. I got a call coming in, so you got to handle this now.
I'll handle it. Give it to us. Let's go. Bring it. So we've gone from a hypothetical to a reality. This will be good. So just so you know, Fred's working on some of the technical stuff, and he's got 3 monitors and 2 iPads and 4 iPhones and 6 microphones. Plus he's wearing a hat. So he's got a lot he's got to manage all at one time. So we're waiting for the caller. We look forward to it. Our very first caller. I'm excited. And I know it's not me calling us, so because I'm here with you.
So we're going to see how this works, but I'm going to bring it's an anonymous caller. So let's see who it is. Can you hear me? Anonymous caller.
Looks like they're on mute. Looks like they're on mute.
Oh, maybe they are.
There they go.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Oh, hi. Fine. How are you?
I'm well. So you called in anonymously, so we won't ask your name, but so what's your question or comment?
How can we help?
How can we help?
Well, I wanted to let you all know that I'm watching you live on YouTube right now, and I've seen all the ads on Facebook and that, and I just wanted to say how pleased I was and seeing that this platform is being done. And there are so many people out there seeking help and not knowing where to go or what to do. And I hope this show lets them do that. but I do have a concern. I'm a grandmother of two teenagers. They're 12 and 13. Their mother is a heroin meth addict. And I wanted to know, were there any programs available for kids that they could call and get support and find out, what they can do and, what they can do to help their mother?
Well, first of all, thanks for calling, and thanks for bringing that forward. So if I understood correctly, these are your grandkids, and it's
Yes.
your daughter you're concerned about, their mother, or is it the grandkids you're concerned about? Or probably both.
Right. Their mother is not my daughter.
Okay.
Their father is my son.
Got it. Okay.
I had raised them for a while, and then they decided a year ago to go live with their mother, who, as I stated, is a drug addict. But they're becoming old enough now to see, what's going on, what's happening in that. But I don't know if there's any programs for support for them that they can go talk to, counseling or different things like that.
You're talking about the grandkids going to a program. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they have programs called Alateen, for example, and what they can do in their immediate area is they can go online and they can Google, or someone can help them, whether it be their dad or maybe you, to kind of get the bus moving in the right direction. But you can Google programs for teens, with a parent who has a substance abuse problem, for example. You can actually put that in the computer and something's going to pop up. There's also a variety of anonymous programs that you can query. Narcotics Anonymous is an anonymous program. They don't even like when I promote it, if you will. I'm not promoting it. I'm just trying to make it available information-wise. Those are all numbers that can be garnered in almost every community across the country, and they can refer you to programs. Now, as far as formal treatment goes, obviously your grandkid's mom, there's treatment she can seek, and if the kids themselves are acting out inappropriate, there's experts out there for them as well, and that's generally also listed. There's also crisis hotlines that will carry a database within your community. I won't ask you what city you're in, but my assumption is if you're in any kind of metropolitan area, there's a number. It's called 211. 211.
Right.
It was kind of set up like after 411 or 911. And that particular group maintains a database of almost every resource you have in your community. So when we hang up, if you will, or after you think about it, you can call 211 and explain your question you've just asked us, and the odds are they'll be able to say, here's something for the mom, here's something for the kids, and they'll give you a couple of different resources that you can follow up on that will get you some information right away. And then, of course, the next step is, how do you vet that information? Then how do you bring it to the table for the kid's mom and for the kids? Is dad still active in their life? I assume he is.
Somewhat. He has, being that he's my son, he has medical issues as well. And refuses to take meds. He's the opposite. He doesn't want anything to alter. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. He doesn't even take an aspirin. So he's on the other spectrum.
Right, but he's present in their lives, so we can get.
Yes, he is. He is.
He can also go to resources as well that will help coach him as a parent, and he can certainly call us, and he and I can talk maybe offline as well, because as the parent who is kind of the clear-headed one of the two, if you will, and of course the mom having an issue with substance abuse, each one of those, the kids, the dad, the mom, all have to head in a direction to get their own support. For example, if any one of them broke an arm, we'd know exactly what to do, right? We take them to the emergency department, they take an x-ray and they set the brake. But when it comes to substance use disorder and also self-medication, it's very opaque. But there is hope. There's resources out there, and there's lots of help. One just has to kind of get into action. And it's amazing when you Google it, how much will pop up for you. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it has. And I will give a call to 211 and find out what is available in our area. And I thank you very much for that.
And
Thank
don't
you.
forget the crisis hotlines, because most communities should have a 211 or something like that. You can go on your county website, and alcohol and drug problems, behavioral issues,
Mhm.
but just doing what you just did is the hardest part. Sometimes asking for help. So I'm really proud of you, and I
Right.
hope we hear from you
Thank
again
you.
about the action steps that you took and what kind of information you found out, because that'll help other people that call in as well. And you're our first caller, so you get VIP treatment. Everyone else will,
Oh, I
but yours
see.
is
Okay.
special. Yeah, we'll
Thank
have
you.
valet parking when you get to the studio one day.
Yeah, you're
Thank
good.
you.
But yeah, definitely call us back next week or the week after. We're not sure when we're going to be live next week yet, but with shows moving further, we will know as we sign off. We'll
Okay.
tell people when we're live again. So thank you
But
for the
I'm
call.
gonna put
Oh.
I'm gonna put my phone number out there, okay? And I want you to write it down. All right, it's 619. Are you getting this?
Okay.
619 area code
Right.
993-2738. That's 619-993-2738. So what you can do is you can text or call me in the next couple of days if you want someone else to talk to a little bit further. I'm happy to take your call, and we'll see what we can work out as far as a plan of success for you.
Great. Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was interesting, huh?
Yeah. Well, we got grandkids, we got the kid's mom, and we've got the dad, and we've got grandma. I mean, those are all, different portals that need to be examined. But the fact that someone is making the call it's important. And look, it clearly talks about this being a family disease. And, even though the dad doesn't have an issue, according to grandma, his mom, but at the end of the day, he was probably together with somebody who does, and she's still acting out. So, everybody has to have a different level of support, because each one is seeing this through their own lenses. So, generally, when I work with grandmas, they're get things done people, because if they're involved, they're not only just involved, they're engaged, and they're not going to stand for it, which is good. It kind of helps with that support that sometimes people need, that little nudge that people, sometimes don't want, but really need to hear.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And I know my grandmother wasn't anyone to mess with. So
Yeah, neither one of mine were.
Yeah, they weren't people to mess with. But
So good for grandma.
listen, this is basically how the show is going to go. We're going to talk about different things, but there are other things we plan to do with the show. This is our first show. Usually there'll be 3 of us, but we're planning on bringing guests on. So one thing I mentioned to a friend of mine, and his first name's Lucky, just so I give him a shout out, because I know he's watching, Lucky. And Lucky wanted me to know today that he just celebrated his 14th year from opioids. So I told him I'd give him a shout out on the show. And
congratulations, Lucky. I mean, 14 years. I mean, that's amazing. By the way, before we get off the grandparent thing, I just want to mention that I think it was 2018, about 2 years ago. I think it was 60 Minutes did a segment, and they interviewed a series of grandparents. And what they said was that year alone, 1.2 million grandparents became parents to the children because they actually lost their children to overdoses, mostly around opioids and fentanyl. So that's, when you think about it, that's staggering. And the interview kind of went on to say how here we are, we're in our 70s or early 80s, and now we're becoming parents because we lost, our children, and now we're going to take care of their children. And that's not something anybody really plans for. So the catastrophic outcome of substance use disorder and the opioid crisis is just overwhelming. I mean, San Diego last year, we just doubled the overdoses in 1 year in our community. So it's something we need to be talking about. It's something we need to hold each other's hand with. It's something that we really need to focus on. I mean, clearly right now with the pandemic, getting, vaccinations, if you're in line for that, or soon will be.
Hey,
good.
Scott, we got another call coming in. So
awesome. Don't sound surprised, Fred.
Well, I just want to let you know to carry the show.
Okay, I'm doing the best I can. So I was saying that, we're in very precarious times right now. And clearly the concept behind talking about substance use disorders and addiction and self-medication has taken a back seat while this pandemic has just overwhelmed all of us across the country. Whether you believe it or not, it's just overwhelming, and millions of lost jobs. People who are in recovery are now at home more than they've ever been, and there's nothing worse, in my opinion. For me, it's one of my weaknesses is if I spend a lot of time alone, I'm stuck in my head. And I like the saying that my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. So if that helps you, let me say it again. My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. So being in this pandemic where I'm actually at home a lot, I'm doing a lot of meetings on Zoom right now, and they're available globally where people can dial in and be part of some sort of interaction or self-help group where they could be hearing, even if you don't talk and you come in anonymously like our recent guest did, you can sit back and listen for an hour and hear other people's stories. And to me, it's one of the best ways to feel less alone is to be with others.
Hey, Scott, I'm going to bring somebody in that wants to tell their story.
Great.
Caller, are you there? Give them a minute. We got to unmute. Wait for them to unmute themselves. This is part of the live show is,
Okay.
there we go. Hey, caller, you there?
You go. I'm here.
Who's calling in? I know this voice.
Hey guys, it's Lucky.
Lucky.
Yep. Hey,
Mr.
guys, how are
14 years.
you? Yeah, it's me. I'm here. Can you hear me now?
I hear you. I hear you fine.
All right. Very good. Yeah. 14 years this past December.
Congratulations, man. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do I need to turn this down?
Yeah, turn yours down.
Yeah.
It's okay.
All
Don't
right.
worry. It's all live.
There we go. Yeah.
It's all live.
14 years this year. Fred, you don't know it. Most people don't know it. You knew my father, Fred. You and I have known each other pretty much most of our lives, almost our whole lives.
Since kindergarten.
Since kindergarten. Everybody knew my dad. What they didn't know about my dad was at home, I went through the same story. I was physically abused and sexually abused by my dad, as well as my sister and my brother. My sister turned out okay. My brother and I both addiction. He's alcohol and mine were drugs. Opiates were my choice. And then it turned to crack and coke on a regular. That was 14 years ago. I ended that. I forgave him and I moved on. And I think a lot of my addiction stemmed from mental health. I think mental health really needs to be addressed here. I think a lot of times if you get in front of mental health, you can get in front of the addiction. The day I forgave my father and popped that bubble and let that pressure go, that was the day I decided to start over and get clean.
Well,
and
that's
14 years later, feeling great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it probably says a lot about how me and you acted as young kids, even though we didn't talk that we were both going through this similar issues. We never knew about each other's issue, but we both acted out. We got along very well, acting very poorly.
Yeah.
As children, getting in a lot of trouble.
What's that saying?
Yeah.
Misery loves company. So, you never know. Sometimes the opposites don't attract.
In some way, we probably saved each other because we remained friends throughout. Now, Lucky is aware of this, and because I didn't turn to drugs in any way, I did step away from Lucky during his bad years. And I regret it to a point, but I had young children. I had my own family, and I didn't have the tools then to save him because he wasn't willing. You weren't willing to save yourself at that point.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Probably wasn't. You probably weren't ready, Lucky, but they say it takes what it takes. So it's interesting. You mentioned you thought I heard you say you started with opioids and you went to crack and then you went to cocaine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was doing crack and coke around the same time. Yeah, it was like when the opioids was just over, I just kind of needed something else, and I just couldn't get it together. Just couldn't get it together. I just couldn't figure out what it was I needed in my life.
So
what I needed was
Are you currently active in your own recovery, or have you just found a path that you work with that works for you?
I found a path that works for me, and
Awesome.
number one, it's to talk about it.
Good.
Talk about it. Let it out. Just constantly let it out. And the more I find that I let it out, the easier my life has become. And I don't need to shield it with drugs or drugs. lots of drugs.
Right.
Pretty much a garbage pail of drugs.
Well, yeah, you said it best. Once you remove, I call it the anesthesia or the self-medication, and then you start really dealing with the real issues. Because at the end of the day, you weren't just doing opioids and crack and methamphetamine because your cable was out. You were trying to self-medicate for one reason or another, and you can't really treat behavioral health issues until you remove that medication. So you're absolutely right. And when Fred went quiet for a few minutes, a couple of minutes ago, I talked about that that the need that we all have, because once you remove it, I mean, I was in treatment formally for 28 days. I had a 1-year follow-up. I was in an outpatient program. I went to 4 meetings a week. I did lots of different things for my own personal recovery because I didn't want to go back to where I was. And where I was
right.
a dark place. So you're absolutely right. It's kind of, think about it. I use the example that when somebody breaks an arm, you know exactly what to do. You take them to the hospital. But once the cast comes off, that physical therapy that you need to massage the muscles again because they've been immobile, it's kind of like what behavioral health is once you get stabilized and you get past the withdrawal piece and the dependency of the drugs. But me as an addict, if I take them in my body again, it's like my body will not have forgotten that I'm addicted to things. It's like an allergy. And the best example I like is Robert Downey Jr. when he said, anytime I ever did cocaine, I always broke out in handcuffs, which, gives you a clear idea, so congratulations on your 14 years and what you did and how you did it, and it worked for you. I'm a firm believer one size does not fit all. So it's awesome for you to come on and share that story.
Listening to the grandmother talk a few moments ago, she was concerned about her grandchildren. Well, I have a daughter who is now 17 years old, and 4 years ago, we just hit the 4-year mark a couple weeks back. My daughter's mother lost her battle to addiction. She passed away, and my daughter was 3 when I decided to get clean. And now in her life, her goal is to go to college. I think, she wants to go to Southern. They have a great college here and in Connecticut. And she wants to be a counselor or a social worker, if you will, for children who have addicted parents, because she is a victim of 2 parents that were addicted. Luckily, I got clean. However, Ava's, mother did not make it. And it's very sad for us. And again, mental health. And just, there was some issues there and we just couldn't get her the help she needed.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that, and I'm excited for your daughter because once she gets the formal credentialing, which is critical, obviously, to be able to help others formally. I don't have that, but her experience will help her trajectory tremendously. And if she truly stays with the path and that's what she wants to do, my sense will be she'll be awesome at it. So wish her all the luck for me. And if there's anything I can do to help, have her call me. And I think it's awesome to take a path like that, because your life experience is going to be a huge gift when she goes and works with others. Really will be.
Absolutely. I mean, and who knows better than she? I mean, really, she lived it. She watched it happen. So I want to thank both you guys for doing this show. It's really important. And if anybody's listening, please call in. I mean, your story may help somebody.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need. Okay,
well, actually, it's your story. Lucky it's your story that might help somebody, because what we want to do is facilitate that, because I just got accused of being a celebrity rehab guy the other day because I'm on local television talking about the overdose rate in San Diego. And I'm thought, I'm not a celebrity
Mm-hmm.
because I go on TV. I'm on TV because not a lot of people want to talk about it. So you're
Right.
you're the solution for people. So really appreciate
Right.
you coming on, even if you know Fred, and even if he owes you money, whatever
Yeah.
your motivation was,
Yeah.
your story was helpful. And you know what? I feel great just hearing it. And then hearing about your daughter, and what she wants to do, it just inspires me to, keep doing what I'm doing, because the trickle down effect is what's going to be not only reduce stigma, but it's also going to change
Yeah.
the way we look at people who have suffered through this awful, awful disease of addiction.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
great.
Well,
Okay, Lucky. Well, thanks for
all right.
calling
Thanks
in.
a lot, guys.
Take
Okay,
care,
I'll
man.
Keep up the
talk to
good
you.
work.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's good. And second
You don't
phone
owe him
call.
money. You don't owe him any money, do you? Anything?
No, I don't owe him any money. He's one of my longest friends, and I
I
had
was
mentioned
joking.
to him about.
Joking, right?
I know, but I was mentioning about this show to him because I'm aware of his problem. But I don't want to. That's the hardest part. Is I'm connected to many people, and even people who don't even think I know they have a problem. I want them to know that that's why I like you being here. If they can't reach out to me, they certainly could reach out to you. And if they do reach out to me, here's something interesting that's happened since I announced this show and been marketing it and promoting it. 3 different private messages from people. And it's very awkward for me, but these are people in my life have come forward to admit an issue they're dealing with.
Right.
Now, where the awkwardness comes in is I'm not trained. I'm just compassionate. I'm just trying to do my human duty and help
Right.
people. And I want people save their lives. But now people are coming to me like I'm the doctor that could solve the problem. So now I'm doing the research. Not that I could ever be credentialed as such. I'm merely a host of a show, but I don't know, just doing the research, you learn so much. And it's quite sad, the statistics that are going on right now. I mean, you're a statistic mate. You love stats. You love statistics. What are some of them you're hearing about?
Well, 1 in 7 families right now are impacted by it. Some studies show 1 in 5. And, I shared with you, and I'll share it again, that right now in our country, 15% of our population suffers from some form of a maladaptive behavior around these issues that we're discussing today: substance disorder, self-medication, people with allergies, alcohol abuse, gambling, food issues, the internet, sex addiction. And again, I don't like going through the list unless we have to, but the 15% that currently suffer, if you will, and their addiction will erupt over the next 12 months, will impact 7 people negatively every day. So if you figure the 15%, you take the 7 out of 10, that's 70. That means 85% of the 330 million people in our country are impacted by this disease of addiction. And, people will call soon at some point and go, they don't think it's a disease, and that's okay. Science says it is. I'm not going to argue with somebody about it, but it's like diabetes. I know my brain is wired a special way, but when you think about that 15%, and then the 7 out of 10 that are impacted daily, someone driving to work, a parent who's impaired, a relationship that's crumbling because someone's under the influence, in Lucky's case, the loss of, a child's parent, his significant other, to this disease of addiction. We know right now in this country, 200 people are dying every day behind the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
Just opioids, not alcohol, not methamphetamine, and not other things, but that's a lot in one given day. It's basically an airplane full of people every single day right now in our country, and people don't know that. I mean, I know it because I'm in the field, and it's funny because I'm not a real scholar, but I do use a lot of statistics because they're powerful tools when someone starts to talk about it and you realize the scope of it. And so in that story I just shared with you about the 1.2 million grandparents became parents in 1 year, primarily from opioid overdoses. When you start to add up and all the trickle down things that happen from this disease of addiction, people taking their own lives, suicides. I mean, we work with veterans now, and right now it's about 18 a day that are taking their own life because they're not getting issues that are blinding them emotionally. They're not getting treated. A lot of it's because of stigma. They don't want to raise their hand and say, I have a problem. And I think part of what we're going to hopefully do is start to open those doors, at least get people to look through the blinds and see out there that, well, it is okay maybe to talk about it in the right environment where it's confidential and you feel safe and you're with somebody you trust. And, to your point, you're going to hear more people that and yeah, throw them to me, but I can see you in 6 months. Your hat will be reversed and you'll be going, I'll take this call. I know what to do now. And you will, because you'll come up. It's not that hard. When you think about it, when you're helping people, it's like setting their GPS. My wife can never fix her clock whenever we have, Pacific Daylight Savings Time. It's not that hard. She doesn't want to learn. So she needs a little help. That's an easy fix. It frustrates me because she should do it by now. But at the end of the day, that's what we can help people do, is really navigate, Fred. And
Well,
it's not
we should mention that your wife is an absolute saint.
Well, I think so. I mean, if I didn't have my wife, I don't think I'd have friends, because she's completely opposite. She's quiet, she's loving, she's friendly, she's popular. People call her, and but she gets a lot of calls from people that say, "Do you think Scott will talk to my son?" Absolutely. But so if you're that advocate for people, and they go, what do I do? Just call Scott, and then we'll have them at some point come back and tell their story, because their story is real time, real life. I got sober a long time ago, but what I do to stay sober, that's another story. How I help people, that's a different story. The fact that you've created this and if I'm not mistaken, we'll mention this whenever we can. You and I met each other within 24 hours, 36 hours. Somehow that synergy was there. And, you called me and said, why do you want to do this? And I said, because it seems like you do, so we kind of just jumped in the boat and we took off from the pier, and here we are. So yeah. It's awesome.
Well, I should say, though, the reason I said your wife is a saint is, I don't know if you could admit this or not, but how many women would have stayed with you through your problem? There's not many.
Well, there's only one. She
Right.
did it. No, and
But
she was with me the last 2 years, my worst time of being under the influence. And the fact that we're coming up on in February, next month will be 39 years. So that I don't tell her every day how grateful I am, because I don't want to spoil it, but I do mention the fact, and she respects the fact, and she'll tell you if she walked in now, that there's nothing more important than my sobriety. And my kids believe that as well. And next is my wife, and next is my kids. So
yeah. So since we're getting close to an hour, first of all, we were talking about suicide. So we should mention that we were talking about suicide prevention. We should mention that I think the first step always should be the suicide hotline. Do you agree with that?
Crisis. And you know what? If you've got somebody in your family that you think is going to hurt themselves or somebody else, you call 911. You do not wait to come talk to us. You take action immediately, and there's a series of hotlines, and especially this last year, finally the groups out of DC that put together the resources. SAMHSA is one of them, NIDA is another. They're national organizations. Just Google crisis hotline, suicide hotline, and make the phone call. Do not wait 1 second if you're not sure. It's just like if somebody's having a stroke, you don't wait to see if they lose feeling in one side of their face, if the symptoms are there. If somebody is choking, you think about the Heimlich maneuver and you move on it. If somebody's been in an auto accident and the car's on fire, you go and you act. If you see your neighbor's house on fire, you call to see if anyone's home. Go across the street and scream and yell to make sure the kids aren't sleeping. When it comes to someone who may be at a point where they no longer want to live, do not hesitate. Make the phone call, 911. Call the crisis hotline. And if people are thinking about it or talking about it, don't hope it's going to go away on its own. Take some action. It's real important, especially right now with COVID and what's going on with people and the volume of needs that our communities have.
And that the number is 800-273-8255. That's the suicide hotline number, crisis hotline number. But they also, there's a lot of people that don't want to make that phone call. They're wary of the protection they get and stuff. And I did some studying on it, and I saw, first of all, there is a text option now. You could actually text and talk to somebody at 741-741. and it's confidential support 24/7, holidays, every
And,
365
they're
days a year.
bound by law. They are bound by law to keep everything confidential. There's the HIPAA criteria that that healthcare industry has as well, that they're not going to, you know, call your family members unless they absolutely, you've given them permission to get help. But that call is anonymous. That call is confidential, and they'll do everything they can. And the level of training that happened this last year with the pandemic, I understand we have more call centers now and resources for that we've ever had before. We've needed them for a long time. So don't hesitate to call them. Do me a favor, give out those two numbers again, real slow, Fred, because I think it's real important for people to know that there's a resource out there. And this, hopefully this, you know, our segment will roll over and over again, and people will play it and know that at the end of the show, here's a safety net for you. There it is right there. 800-273-8255 is the suicide crisis hotline. And then you could text them as well by texting 741-741. Jot that down. You may never know when you might need it.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the show notes later
Good
on.
job. Thank
so
you.
so people understand that and stuff. But you know what, I'm gonna say we did a solid hour here, Scott, and I think we introduced ourselves well. I don't think we could, this is pretty much what it's going to be. I'm assuming we're going to get some guests, like I was saying. We'd like to get some authors, like doctors that have written. You have a book coming out very soon, correct?
I do. Yeah. Actually, the new book's going to be out hopefully in March, and it's called The Opioid Epidemic. So it's very, very topical, and it's got a lot of, I think, great ingredients to it of family members who are sharing their stories. So hopefully there'll be a lot of tools there for families as well. And we'll figure out a way to get that book pushed out there to any of our viewers. And you know, I'm excited about it. I've been on it for a couple of years now, and it's being tweaked right now and edited, and it will be in print hopefully within the next 3 to 5 weeks. So I'm real excited about that. And there is a lot of people out there, and hopefully they'll be looking for us as a place to tell their story, because they're I've met them all. You know, my happy hour, my podcast, and I haven't had the national platform you do, but I think we'll attract some people, and maybe we'll get Robert Downey Jr. on here one day to talk about that comment about the, you know, doing cocaine. He broke out in handcuffs. I'd love to hear that story.
Well, I do think we got a format here from the podcasting standpoint of that I'm involved in. It's hard to get famous people to come on and just tell their same story over and over and over. But I think our format is giving these famous people, now famous people, they're still human beings. So we care about everybody out there that's having struggles, but famous people bring something with their sobriety. People listen, and that's what people need to do. They got to know that you don't have to be famous to get sober, but it helps when a famous person talks about their sobriety, and it makes their fans or other people notice. So getting some famous people on here would be great. And there's plenty of them from all different, from sexual abuse and on.
And they truly are the stigma busters. That's really where you can leverage someone who's a celebrity, because when, you know, when they've got a couple million followers on, you know, Instagram or something, and they make a statement, people, and they go, look, this happened to me, this took place, and what I want you to do is have the courage to call and ask for help, because they're influencers, and they're able to take their base and influence them differently than maybe you and I can. But you're right, they're just human beings. They have families, they've had loss, and they've had their own trauma. I mean, again, Robert Downey Jr. spent time in the California prison system. He's public about that and has been for years. And he's been one of the most successful celebrities, evidently, who's gotten clean, has a family, has children, and he's become one of the biggest stars on the planet. And I don't think that ever would have happened to him if he continued with his cocaine problem.
Right. Okay, Scott. So that's going to be it. But
Awesome.
Thank you. I think we did good. I think we work well together. I mean, not bad for an old man and a young, strapping young fellow like myself.
Well, I guess you can lie. That's the last part of the segment. Go ahead.
Right. And we'll talk about lying on next episode.
Well, yeah, the compulsive obsessive behavior. You know, one thing, 3 skills of a good drug addict or somebody who actively is using is lying, cheating, manipulating. We haven't talked about that. We'll do that in the next show. Well, thank you.
We have plenty of shows, but thank you. So this is Ending the Stigma, and I'm Fred Carroll. That's Scott H. Silverman. Jennifer Field will be here eventually sometime. You'll see her beautiful face. She's a beautiful woman and a great soul. And thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week sometime. I'll try to promote it as well, and we'll probably have a schedule more built after that.
Got
So thanks for the people that called in, and thanks for everyone that's listened.